In 2023, you wrote a piece where you called for depoliticizing defense. Can you speak a bit more about that and specifically how you see defense playing a role in the upcoming election here in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, by depoliticizing, I mean doing away with the spectacle of an incoming government canceling major procurement projects that have a long history of investment and involvement. And I'm talking about the F-35, but I could also reference the Sea King replacement, where incoming government says, no, we're not going to buy Cadillac equipment because the previous government promised that it was too expensive, and then ended up buying the same aircraft, the same airframe at a massive cost to the Treasury, to the taxpayers, by the way. Penalty clause for breaking the contract, plus you're flying an older aircraft longer than its life expectancy. And then, for a period of time, the transition of using two different platforms, that also cost the Treasury. With F-35, we're seemingly ready to hit the pause button again, even though this is a important fifth generation stealth aircraft whose development history goes back to the 90s. So there's actually been now 4 different governments that have had a touch on this particular aircraft, which we badly need. I mean, the current fleet of CF-18s are 45 years old or will be older by the time we take full delivery of a replacement fleet. And so, I mean, that's just maybe an obvious example of where politics got in the way. Criticisms of that aircraft that it didn't fly simply were not true. And there are 19 different countries and soon to be more flying that aircraft. Interoperability, I have to inject here, is an important consideration for certain types of equipment, as is, to be fair, the possibility that the intellectual property owned by Lockheed Martin and controlled by the United States government, it has to be considered, as does the supply chain, where in the original contract, it was envisioned that Canada would make a lot of parts, not just for the fleet that we were purchasing, but for the global supply chain. And all of that has to be negotiated early on and predicated on the follow through as opposed to the stops and starts of cancellations and re-engagement. So one way to achieve, I think, greater efficiencies, Angelina, is to have a military department of procurement or a focus, if you will, on doing it right, taking away, the politicization around the cost. I mean, it's triggering in a way because I mean, I was criticized for saying we were undervaluing the actual cost of the contract. Well, the information I'm getting is not made up. It's coming from nonpartisan professional public servants at the Department of National Defense and Public Works and others. They're providing the information. But then you have the Auditor General, the Parliamentary Budget Office, and a ginned up opposition who see a vulnerability to embarrass the government. And so taking a step back, and I served in opposition and government, one would hope, maybe naively, even after all these years, that there is a much higher priority on fighter planes than photocopiers. We need to try to remove that thorn when it comes to the tendency to skewer the government over the cost of military spending. It's expensive to protect our freedoms and our liberties and everything we hold dear. And I'm quick to add, protect the lives of those men and women who stand in harm's way and are ready to leave behind everything that they hold dear to go off and complete, hopefully successfully, missions in the name of our country. So it requires a meeting of the minds, and it requires sort of a higher calling from our politicians to make these things happen, both the procurement and resisting the knee-jerk reaction of criticizing the government. Not to suggest, that they get a pass, but if we could just try to be a little bit more both constructive and factual on these discussions.